Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. Trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is home ownership consultant Ross Kay from the wealthyhomeowner.ca, Canada's authority on home ownership. Welcome back to the show, Ross.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Jim.
Ross, last week CMHC admitted it was paying money for research to Paul Kershaw and Generation Squeeze in BC. CMHC then said, don't worry, we're not going after your home equity. Well, this is a government organization. Should we really take them at their word?
Yeah, I think we should take them at their word in terms of that they're not going to be committed to that word. It's these little outs they continue to give themselves. I come from a world where if you didn't live up to what you said, and if you weren't precise, in other words, what you were saying, you really meant what you were saying, your career would be in shambles. Nobody's going to trust you a second time to buy a house if you lied to them the first time or you misled them the first time. That's why there's such a turnover in the real estate industry. It's because almost no one deals with the same real estate agent selling their house than was the real estate agent they used to buy it. The turnover, it's just like staggering, Jim. It's in the 80%, well over 80%, where people choose another real estate agent the next time they're dealing with real estate. When we hear comments that Paul Kershaw and Generation Squeeze is involved in anything, we go back to a couple of years ago, I believe, even on this show, where we talked about some of the nonsense that this academic was pontificating about and was convincing millennials in Vancouver to believe. He was trying to create a movement which, in my view, is really a socialist movement, a movement to take wealth from people who have spent their lives building it and transfer it over to academics like himself. He didn't want to do it. He wanted to do it through nefarious ways by presenting false data to the public, like the old, it takes you 100 years to save for a down payment on a house in Vancouver stories that were broadcast across Canadian mainstream media at the time. So when we hear that this guy's involved, been paid $250,000, I think it was $250,000, or part of a $250,000 project by CMHC, we know exactly what they're going to say. We also know that CMHC did research and saw who used to pay Paul Kershaw and Generation Squeeze, companies like West Bank. Yeah, that's right, folks. This guy who's taken money from anyone who would give him money and crafts his research towards providing the answer those paying for the research would like to have results. I suspect fully, considering the words of Evan Siddell over the last couple of speeches he's given, and his arrogance towards the way that he views Canadian homeowners, that he wants to have fulfilled his legacy that the Canadian housing wealth should be taxed. That's what I believe. The man is simply clueless. He oversees, Jim, an organization which in itself is responsible for allowing this entire housing bubble to form. CMHC, let me get this on the record. From our viewpoint, CMHC and their staff, who lacks any understanding how the home trading infrastructure and the home buying infrastructure functions in Canada, is solely responsible for the housing bubble that we're in now. Because CMHC effectively has allowed a Ponzi scheme to be perpetuated through organized real estate. CMHC and no one else. Now let me clearly state why CMHC has allowed this Ponzi scheme to be perpetuated. CMHC created the first digital way of appraising real estate. It was called Emily. Emily was a joke when they launched it, and it's a joke today. Anyone who has ever actually done a full appraisal on a property based on the founding principles of what an appraisal is required to be calculated from understands that Emily is a fraud. There is no way that the Canadian Real Estate Association sells 500,000 homes in a year and that 500,000 of those sales close. Because the valuations that are arrived at the night of the offer are based on the random opinion of a buyer. A buyer who does not have access to the ability to do an appraisal on the property, determine its value. A buyer who has not had a building inspection yet completed on the property. A buyer who often will never have a building inspection done on the property. A buyer who is led to believe the price of the house is the highest price that he or she will pay. A buyer who is led to believe that the price that's being asked for the house is because what the neighbor's house sold for 3 months ago, and the price change that has taken place across their community in the meantime. CMHC will allow Canadian home buyers to leverage that at 95%. In other words, based on the random opinion of 500,000 random home buyers purchasing 500,000 random homes, CMHC has allowed all of those transactions to close. What CMHC wants you to believe is that there were no mistakes in 500,000 purchases. The random opinion of values of 500,000 Canadian families who are not trained in determining the value of real estate was right. There were no mistakes. Why did CMHC allow this Ponzi scheme to go on? Well, it's really quite simple. Because they don't know how the home trading infrastructure works. A realtor, what CMHC is financing is this. The 5% down, it covers the real estate commission and the GST. That's right, folks. The 5% down that CMHC is requiring would cover the commissions and the GST payable on average across Canada. Now, in order to get that commission included in the purchase price that a buyer pays, because there's not a buyer in Canada today who's writing a check to the real estate broker, CMHC is allowing those commissions that the buyer is paying to be included in the purchase price. In other words, if the buyer had the 5% required to pay the commission in GST, the buyer would say, hey, wait a second, I'm not going to give you $100,000 for the house. I'll give you $95,000 for the house, and I'll pay for the commission out of my pocket. There's not a home seller in Canada who would disagree to that. Every home seller in Canada would say fine. The only people who say no are the realtors, because the realtors understand that when you write a check for $30,000 to cover the real estate fees and then hand that check over to a real estate broker, all of a sudden you realize what you're actually paying, and you're realizing what little you got for what you paid. So in order to hide those commissions, you include them in the purchase price. You also claim that the seller is the one who's paying them. You can go to any real estate website across Canada, including those run by the regulators, and the regulators will say why that you should use a realtor or a real estate agent or a real estate sales rep is because, as a buyer, you don't have to pay. I'm shaking my head. What are you talking about? Up until 2002, it was the opposite. Every single home seller in Canada was told, hey, don't worry about it. You don't pay the commission, the buyer does. And then in 2002, where buyer agency came in, the conversation flipped. And it flipped depending on who you were talking to. If you're talking to the seller, real estate agents said the buyer's paying. If you're talking to the buyer, the real estate agents say that the seller's paying. The fact of the matter is, legally, in every province in Canada today, if you sign a contract as a buyer or a seller, you're going to pay half the commission. But it's always included in the purchase price, which means the buyer is not only paying their commission, they're paying the seller's commission too. And CMHC is financing it. CMHC is allowing you to leverage that. So that what that means is there's not a home seller in Canada that I have ever met who's wanted to sell their home at a loss. That means as long as the real estate agents involved in the transaction can get whatever the owner originally paid for the house, plus the real estate fees, the owner still feels that they're breaking even. This has gone on for 40 years. CMHC is so incompetent, they don't understand that's how the industry is set up. They don't understand there are years and years over the last 40 where the house prices have simply gone up the required amount of commission to pay the real estate brokers. If you go back over the last 40 years and you calculate the aggregated increase in selling price, it almost is exclusively the commissions required to be covered in that calendar year. So what CMHC has done is they finance the home based on the opinion of a buyer. The opinion of the buyer is been directed by the real estate agents who have convinced the buyer that the home is worth what it was worth last year plus real estate fees. CMHC then finances it. Now, people will say, well, but Ross, CMHC doesn't finance all the properties. They generally only finance those or insure those with an ownership of those that are sold with less than 20% down. Now, this is how the Ponzi scheme works. Joe sees a house that was worth $100,000 last year, and he pays $105,000 for it this year. Covers the real estate fee. CMHC says, okay, Joe, as we did with the other 500,000 homes across Canada sold this year, we will agree your opinion of value is correct. That's $5,000. Now, when Joe gives that extra $5,000 to the owner of the house, that is leveraged on a first trade, generally speaking, 4 times. So $5,000 becomes $25,000. On the next trade, it's leveraged again, but it's generally leveraged at a 60%. So your $25,000 is becomes, let's get my calculator out here. 25 times, 25 divided by 0.4 times 100. That becomes $62,500. And then on the next trade, it doubles. It goes to $120,000 because that's how the home equity pyramid, the home trading pyramid works. It is a Ponzi scheme where the first $5,000 is passed on to the next person who then goes to the bank and leverages that $5,000 multiples of times, which in turn is leveraged a third time and a fourth time with an increasing magnitude of leverage in terms of dollar value with each passing trade. CMHC itself could have stopped everything that we've witnessed from happening by doing one thing. And that one thing is this. All they had to do was say, no matter what you pay for a home, we will only insure it on a valuation from 365 days ago. That's all that they had to do. They had to make one single change. And none of what has taken place over the last decade would have ever happened. All they had to do was say, we understand you think the house is worth $105,000, but we know it's only worth $100,000. So we're only going to use $100,000. You have to come up with the extra $5,000 in cash because we're not going to allow you to use that 105 as your valuation. We're only going to allow you to use 100. So instead of coming up with $5,000 down, you have to come up with $10,000 down. And they could have explained to the Canadian population, the reason we're doing this is we're not going to allow real estate commissions to be financed, included in the purchase price, leveraged, and then for you to make payments on it for the next 25 years. I mean, I really don't think most Canadians understand how it works. Because a homeowner generally will move over three times. By the time they purchase their third house, they are still going to have a mortgage. That means that extra 5% they were charged the first time for commission is still included in the money that they're financed. The amount of money included in the second transaction is still included in the finance. The real estate fees they paid in the third transaction is still included on the finance on the first day that they own that third home. Then, for whatever remaining years of amortization that they have left, those real estate fees will aggregate all that mortgage interest to be paid off. CMHC itself has allowed the CMHC Ponzi scheme to just radically destroy their affordability metrics that they themselves have created. CMHC alone, because all they had to do was institute one policy change, and it would have stopped all the surplus from being built into the housing bubble, turned its back on it. And instead, they allowed this Ponzi scheme to exist, to reach a point to where it is today, where it is impossible for Canadians to take on enough mortgage debt for it to continue. As we've said on previous shows, Jim, this lockdown is allowing data points to be collected that have never been before possible in the history of organized real estate. These data points on housing markets that are being collected from March through till today, more specifically from April through till today, and in the ensuing months coming forward, has never before happened. You can debunk organized real estate and the CMHC Ponzi scheme in real time, the same way that we can debunk the Canadian Real Estate Association's claim that house prices increased 7% year over year in June. It is a fraud. It is a falsehood. I can make those statements without fear of being sued by the Canadian Real Estate Association or CMHC because I have the data to prove it. I have the way to calculate how housing markets work to prove it. The reason why we say we can time the market is we can prove it. It's the reason why none of our members have made a mistake since we moved to the advisory situation. Not one. CMHC has run a Ponzi scheme. They can hire Paul Kershaw in Generation Squeeze all they want. Paul Kershaw in Generation Squeeze cannot explain how the Ponzi scheme works. COVID, the lockdown, is going to allow that to be revealed in 100% real time.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after the break.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay. Ross, Craig from Caledonia, Ontario, asked if mortgage deferrals will open up buying opportunities when they finally take hold.
Okay, so Craig from Caledonia, here's what you've got to understand. because we're hearing a whole bunch of commentary out there in the social media ether that is nonsense. The Canadian government is going to have to enact policies or legislation that will allow Canadians who've been unable to pay their mortgages because the government decided they couldn't go to work, to be able to extract themselves from the situation that they're in. It was not going to be a waiver of mortgage interest. It is not going to be any of the crazy things that you hear out there that a lot of the tenants are claiming are going to happen or are happening. It's just real, hard, data-driven reality. The Canadian government is going to have to allow at least those that were truly impacted by this lockdown. In other words, people who had purchased homes or owned homes with good, secure jobs using rational thought and prudence, the same rational thought and prudence that home buyers have used for the last 40 years in Canada, that has prevented foreclosures from ever being the problem that it is in the United States. The government is going to have to allow them to extend their mortgage amortizations. Now, the beautiful part about 1.99% interest rates is that if you take even a year of mortgage payments and you simply tack them on to the end of your amortization. So in other words, if you had 12 years left, you're going to tack on another year. You're going to have a 13-year amortization. The mortgage interest is technically a balance sheet item for the bank. In other words, the banks can allow you to move those amortizations from this lockdown period or to whenever this lockdown effectively ends to the end of your mortgage, 12 to 13 years down the road. The banks can claim the interest, the value of the interest that you would have had to pay during this lockdown for your mortgage, on their balance sheet. Because what they've effectively done is they've grown their mortgage book, the size of their mortgage book, in the exact same way that they would have grown it by giving new mortgages to new people. They're simply giving you, or let's use this term. All they need to do is really refinance your mortgage. They only need to refinance it by extending your amortization by whatever period's needed. Now, I don't think this should go on forever, but I think that this is a rational, balanced solution for a national pandemic that has locked families out of jobs. It is, I watch what goes on, Jim, and I just shake my head. The continual insulting of Canadian families. This continual putting them down. They didn't save enough money for a pandemic lockdown. They didn't save enough money for this. Look, if you know that you have a secure job and you know that you're going to receive your income for the next year, you're going to make rational decisions in the amount of home that you can buy. It doesn't matter what everybody says about you. If you believe you can carry a $3,000 mortgage, you know whether or not you can carry a $3,000 mortgage. If you can carry a $1,500 mortgage, you know that's all you can afford, or all that you're comfortable affording. The only way that we get out of this mess that we're in right now today is by simply taking the pressure off of asking people to repay missed payments. Look, everybody should have to pay what they owe. Everybody should have to meet the obligations of their contract. But when the government is the one who says, we're going to stop you from meeting your obligations of the contract, they have to allow the infrastructure to change to prevent any damage from being done because of this government intervention. This is no different, in my opinion, than when the government says all of a sudden that they're going to close down the oil sands effectively. Okay, if you're going to close down the oil sands, and that's a political decision voted on by the Canadian public, so be it. If you're going to do that, though, you need to be prepared to financially compensate those people equally to what their employment career would have been at least for the next 10 years in the oil sands. This is exactly what we're talking about today. And this is what Craig has to understand. There is no political party in Canada that will be able to withstand the outrage if a government-induced default situation causes a family to lose their home. And since interest rates are technically at zero, but we'll look at mortgage rates at technically at 2% for a 5-year term, the governments simply need to allow homeowners to refinance and refinance to include the deferred portion of their mortgage. Now, where the problem exists, Jim and Craig in Caledonia, is that what if the government allows someone to buy a home in April, close on it in July, and defer their mortgage in August? That is an unethical situation, because what the government has technically allowed is the sales that you heard reported in June to close in August and for them to immediately go into a mortgage deferral situation. That is unethical. The government should not have allowed that to happen. But the level of incompetence of government, I think, is really explained in the CERB payments. There is no reason that anyone should be asked to go back to work today and take less money than the government was giving them on CERB. All the government had to do is institute the policy that the Conservatives had, where there was going to be a clawback. In other words, there is a motivation for people to leave their house and go back to work because there's a financial benefit to do so. No, the government is remaining firm, and they want to penalize those people who go back to work. I know families right now who are going back to work where they're making the exact same amount of money as they were staying home on CERB, where their neighbors are still staying home on CERB by choice. It's unethical, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen. The problem is that the government created a policy that wasn't designed to prevent that from happening. They created a policy to get money out, which I respect. I mean, they were responsible for this lockdown, but they should have immediately, over the next 60 days, been revising the policy. So when the time came for people to need to go back to work, there was an incentive for them to stay home. Because if you choose to stay home, there's a high probability your job will never return. You're going to then be going on unemployment or welfare. Governments haven't discussed that anywhere across Canada. So from Craig from Caledonia, what you have to understand is governments react irrationally. It's not the Canadian voter that acts irrationally. It's not the Canadian home buyer that has irrational exuberance. It's irrational decision-making by Canadian governments to get reelected. There is no way that any political party in Canada will get elected if they allow hundreds of thousands of Canadian homeowners to go into delinquency. The solution, thus, is very simple. They will simply allow you to either extend your amortization through a legislative policy voted on by the House of Parliament, or OSFI will mandate that Canadian banks offer those who need it the ability to refinance based on the valuations that were established at the time of the lockdown began. So, Craig, if you're looking on mortgage deferrals as an opportunity to buy, that's not going to happen. You simply have to, Craig, accept that we are in a full-blown housing correction, no matter what all these housing pundits are telling you. There is not enough money that is going to be able to be booked in mortgage debt to support the current valuations of homes. Housing prices are exactly the same this year as they were last year. I don't care what anyone tells you. The data proves it. And, Craig, you simply need to wait this out and let the surplus in the existing housing bubble be burned off, and your buying opportunity will arrive.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Ross, can we get a quick answer on this one? Because I have an appointment, and that's what the alarm was in half an hour.
No problem.
That I have to be at. Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay. Speaking of home prices, Rose from Newmarket, Ontario asked, I've spent the last 2 weeks trying to find 1 month where I could prove house prices rose in Newmarket. I have failed, so I guess your $10,000 prize remains safe. That said, why do I still believe home prices have gone up in the last year? She really believes it. Have they done a really good job of brainwashing here, Ross?
I don't think it's, yes, it is brainwashing in the sense that we believe it, okay? We actually believe it. You can look at the streets and you can't find the houses that prove house prices have changed in the last year. You can't find them, but you still believe that it's true. I mean, it's normal that you believe it's true. The government tells you that it's true. The realtor associations tell you it's true. The mortgage brokers associations tell you it's true. The bankers tell you it's true. Economists tell you it's true. They tell you how the affordability issue has worsened over the last year. They tell you how Canada is worse than the United States. A new report from the Fraser Institute. It's all hogwash, folks. It isn't real. As Rose from Newmarket has found out. She spent 2 weeks, by the sounds of it, 2 weeks searching the sold sites, I'm assuming, because they're prolific in the Newmarket area, where every single MLS house that has been on the market has sold. Like every house that is sold, the data is readily available. No charge free for anybody to look at. And she can't find one street where she can prove that house prices changed in the last month. I would tell Rose, try to find a street or try to find an area, a neighborhood, try to find a city where they've changed in the last year. And I'll tell you, she can't find it because it hasn't happened. People believe what they have grown up believing, being told. As the first segment of the show talked about, we talked about how the objective, no home seller in Canada is willing to sell their house for less than what they paid for it, unless they're going to lose their house, okay? Unless there's some drastic life event that forces them to do that. They need to get the price they paid for the house at a minimum, plus the real estate fees added on top, all the costs. That's what they need. Organized real estate is built to deliver that answer. The entire MLS infrastructure in Canada is built to deliver that answer, Rose. It's not built for any other reason. It's built to allow realtors to get paid a commission, and that means the commissions are included in the purchase price. That's what it's built for, Rose, which is why you can't find any price change after looking with I think you said 2 weeks, Jim. 2 weeks. You spent 2 weeks looking. You probably thought you're going to be able to collect this $10,000 prize really easily. Well, I can tell you, Rose, there's hundreds of real estate agents who have tried to collect it, and they can't collect it. I mean, if there was real estate agents out there who could collect it or believe they collect it, they would be all over social media today saying, oh, this guy's full of crap. Here's the proof. There's no proof. You can't prove it. CMHC would come out and say, Ross Kay doesn't know what he's talking about. Korea would come out and say, hey, Ross Kay's a liar and we're going to sue him. They can't do that. When I was a member of Organized Real Estate, the Canadian Real Estate Association used to send me letters every couple of weeks, cease and desist. The moment I turned in my real estate license, they quit sending them. I haven't received one since. Why? Because they can't prove house prices change in 30 days. So you believe something, Rose, that is going to be debunked, is already debunked, you just don't know it. It's going to be debunked going forward. You are going to see how the Canadian public has been manipulated by the home trading infrastructure and those who run it to deceive you into believing a house price goes up enough so that the real estate fees can be paid. Go back, folks. Find out what a house was selling for in Canada in 1982, and then look what the average selling price is in 2020. Calculate the compound annual growth rate of that average purchase price.
Ross, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks for having me on, Jim.
My guest has been homeownership consultant Ross Kay from thewealthyhomeowner.ca. If you have any questions for Ross or anyone else on our show, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HoweStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HoweStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HoweStreet.com radio is a production of HoweStreet Media Incorporated.